In this lecture, we'll discuss variable, and let's first start with a recap in case you missed the previous assignment. So as you remember, we managed to define two global variables to hold the Trello API key and the Trello API token. So if you click this I here, you will see here under globals that we have two values. And just in case you do not have them yet, simply click on edit, and you'll be given the possibility of adding a key with the name of the variable that you want to save and a value. So in my case, I just used Trello key, given this key, and Trello token, given this token that I had. And this is very easy then to change and to manage. And once you add it, simply click on save, because if you do not click on save, nothing will be persisted. Then you will have access to those values. Now, the way you can access the variables that you have saved in the request builder is by using this syntax. So you open two curly brackets, and then you type in the name of the variable as you have defined it, and then you close the two curly brackets. So let me show you how it works. We have used global variables in the request, and if I open here the params panel, you will see here that key now has Trello key and token has Trello token. And if I hover my mouse over them, you will even see that what kind of value do they have and what is their scope. So in this case, the scope is global, and Postman gives you a preview on what are the values that will be used in this case. And if it doesn't show this value, it means that they haven't been created yet or they haven't been saved yet. And you can use this syntax anywhere in the request builder. So just a reminder, the request builder is anything that has to do, for example, here authorization or headers or in the body or anywhere apart from the pre-request script and the test. Here you cannot use the syntax, and I'll show you in just a bit where you can use it. But apart from that, anywhere else, here in the request, in parameters, in any panel that you get from Postman, you can use this syntax while working with variables. Now, since I mentioned scripts, it's important to understand how you can work with variables from scripts, because not all the time you will go inside that panel and save an information there, but sometimes you only have that information inside the script. So it's important to know inside the script how you can access it, but how you can set variables. And the way you can get a value inside the script from a global variable is by using pm.globals.get, and then as a string you can give the variable key, so the way you named your variable. And in order to set a new global variable, all you have to do is give it a name and a value. So it's pretty easy on how the panel actually works, but this is something that you can do from inside the scripts. Additionally, from the scripts, you can unset, so practically delete a global variable that you do not need anymore. So for example, you needed something, and then after the request completed or at a later point, you establish that you do not need this value anymore. And then you can unset it so that you'll have a clean global variables space, to put it that way. And you can even delete all the global variables with the pm.globals.clear. Well, this will actually delete all the global variables, and probably this is something that you do not want to do, but just in case, hey, in case you need it, it's there. Now let's have a look on how we can use global variables in our request. Now, as you remember from the previous assignment, in one request we're creating a board, and every time we're creating this board, a new ID is being generated. And this is something that is changing all the time. So this is one information that we have in one request, but we need it in another request. So in the create to-do list, we need the same information. And so far we have manually copied and pasted this information. And because we want to automate everything, we need to find a way on how to pass the information from request A to request B. And this is one good usage in Postman for variables. So what we will do in the first request, after we create a board, we will save a global variable. And in the second request where we need a global variable, we'll actually use it. And for the moment, we can say that we do not need it anymore, and we can delete it once we don't need it. So let's see how it goes. In order to work with variables in Postman, you can use the snippets panel, and this is exactly what I will do. And I want to set a global variable. So I'll use here the snippet set a global variable, and the variable that I want to set is board ID. I'll type here board ID, and the value will be something that I will get from the response. So of course I can type in a string with anything I want, but in this case this is something that I need to get from the response. So what happens is that I first parse the response, and this is already happening here. So I have response, and from the response I will save the property ID, and that will be ID. Every time you're unsure about something, feel free to use console.log to log all this information that you have in your tests and scripts. Now let's rerun this request and see if board ID has been indeed saved. So I'm clicking on send, and I can quickly inspect the globals here. And indeed you'll see we have a new value, board ID, with this information. And you can even cross-check it against what we had in response and what was actually saved in the global variable. Now, we have this information in the global variable, which means any other request or even any other collection can use this information. And because we now need it in the second request that we are running, the create to-do list, we're simply gonna use it. And we are here inside the request builder. So gonna open double curly brackets. I'm gonna say board, and you can see I even have auto completion, and now I have board ID, and that is being passed from the first request to the second request. I can run this request again. There are even some tests failing. This is not a problem. This is actually a good thing to see that tests are failing. What's happening here? I have a hard-coded board ID, so it means I need to get here the dynamic value as well. So we used here this syntax inside the request builder, and it seems to be working fine. Now we need to use the Postman API in order to retrieve this information inside our script. Then I'm gonna say here, get a global variable, remove this. I'm just gonna copy and paste it here. The name of the global variable is board ID. Okay, now it looks much better. Let's retry it again. And now we'll see that all the requests are working. So just to recap, in the first request, after parsing the response body here, we can use any information from the response body and store it inside a global variable. And this is what we did here. And then in the second request, or in any other request after the first request, you can grab this information that you can easily inspect here in the globals. We can grab this information either in the request builder or inside scripts. And we did both here. We use it inside the script and inside the request builder. And then we checked here that this information works properly. Now, for the moment, after this request, we do not need this global variable anymore. So what we can do is to clear a global variable by using this snippet. And this can be done right here at the end when we are sure that we are finished with everything. So we can say here globals unset. I'm gonna unset this global variable. So what will now happen? The request will be sent, the test will be executed, and right at the end, this board will be unset, and you will see here that this information is no longer available, but obviously it was passed from the first request into the second request and then deleted. But just in case you need it in other requests, you can delay or even don't do it at all to unset a global variable. But generally, it's a good practice that once you do not need any information anymore in your request, in your collection, to delete it at a certain point. I hope you got the main idea on how you can use global variables. So one scenario is that where you store some information that you have locally and you don't want to have it inside your collection, like in my case with key and token, but you can use global variable to pass information from one request to the other from inside the scripts, and this can be pretty useful as well.